Hi, and welcome to Tiger Art. Today, we're going to be looking more at the Forger app for your iPad. We looked at just a little bit of some of the basic features of Forger in the previous lesson. If you don't quite remember all of them or everything we went over, please take time to go back to that video. Otherwise, you may be a bit lost during this one. We will look at a few more features with this. Now, this is a very powerful piece of software that has many different things that you can do with it. We're only going to focus on a small subset of features in Forger for this particular project. As we continue, perhaps we can do more units and learn some of the more complicated features, but for now, we're just going to focus on making something simple. So I want you to look at what I made with my third grade students last year. This was a project where they used a program just like Forger to do the same thing. Starting with a sphere, they were told to create some kind of sea creature. Then we took all of those sea creatures and put them into this underwater VR environment. With a VR headset on, we were able to walk through, or I guess metaphorically swim through the space. And you can look around and there's all their sea creatures are swimming around with their names underneath, and so that you can tell whose is whose, and you can work your way around through the scene, and there's other fish and sharks, and it was a really cool experience. Now that was one thing that we could do. Other things that we could do would be like this, where we create an app that is an augmented reality app that can showcase your undersea creature. That's where we're going to be going with this project. So I want that to be in the back of your mind, that you will be ultimately creating some kind of sea creature. Now, we could do this a few different ways. We could try to make a sea creature that already exists, and you could try to sculpt that. If that's the way you want to go, absolutely. That would be a great way to approach this project. Now, not everybody wants to do that, and some people may want to create their own imaginary sea creature. That's what I would encourage, because it's going to be more unique. Everybody's will be quite a bit different, and I think it will be more a celebration of your creativity than anything else. And also, you don't have to worry about trying to make it look like something, because that can be quite stressful and maybe a bit beyond what we are prepared to do with this project. So if we keep it simpler and just have fun with this, I think making your own imaginary creature could be a better way to go. Now, if you want to make a shark or a squid or a specific type of fish that you've seen, that would be cool too. You know, I really encourage that as well. Whichever direction you want to take this project, I'm here to help you make that happen by showing you some of the basic things. So let's get right into Forger Part 2. All right, so we're going to open the Forger app, and we're just going to start from template sphere. Couple of things you may want to know right off the bat. This sphere shows up as just a plain old gray sphere. So you have the opportunity to change the look of that. You can change what the material is made of. There's a place where you can go to do that, and it is right here. So the materials tab is the one that looks like those three rulers that are kind of split out. You're going to hit that, and you're going to hit the blue plus sign, and you're going to hit lit sphere. So then the one that is white, or the one that is whitest, and it is very shiny looking, bright, you click on it, it says toy plastic. That's what you want. So go ahead and hit apply to selection, and now your model is made of something that's like shiny white plastic. So it could be, we could work with it a lot easier when we get into coloring. We're not going to get into that just yet. So you got this toolbar at the top here. You got a lot of things that you can use. One thing I would suggest at some point in time is these three sliders in the top corner of your, these 3 circles. Everything is moved in this view. You're going to click the 3 circles there next to the rulers, and where it says wireframe, you can turn that on. That's going to be helpful for understanding what today is all about. So now I've turned on the wireframe. This is what the iPad is actually doing. It's looking at where all these points are. So everywhere that 2 lines intersect, there's a point there. And when you use one of your sculpting tools, like standard, it's just moving those points around in space. So then when you turn, the iPad is trying to figure out where that point is in 3D space, like imaginary 3D space. So if you're trying to make a sculpture of a character or something, knowing what is going on with those little lines that are everywhere is important when it comes to not overloading the iPad. The iPad's not as powerful as a computer, so when they make like an animated movie, they might make their character with a really dense bunch of squares there. So there's like 1 million squares in it. We can't do that on the iPad. You're going to start running out of memory and it's going to crash. So just to reiterate that, keeping the wireframe on sometimes is helpful in making sure that you're maintaining a good level of of squares in your model. So once again, just some review. The standard brush is going to add clay. Holding the plus/minus button with your left thumb while you do this is going to subtract clay or cut in. So when you add something and then you cut in around it, that's one way of doing this. So let's say you cut in a bunch here. You want this all to go down. But, this isn't a good way of doing this. I would probably scale it up and do it differently. But let's say you do that and you like the shape of it, but you don't like how messy that is looking. So what you really want is to be able to smooth it out. There's a tool for that in your toolbar. It's called Smooth. And you probably don't want it up that high. You start going over this and you'll notice that it's smoothing out a lot of that wrinkly stuff. So it doesn't look as crazy. You can turn the size up here and then smooth over the whole thing and get it to look better. Well, if you still don't like it, I would suggest, if you don't like this shape, let me show you something you could do. You could use the flatten tool and just flatten out this side. Now with symmetry turned on, of course, as it always is, or always should be for us, it's going to do the same thing to the other side. So I'm starting to change the shape of this character's head. So flatten is a good way of doing that if you have a large one. And then when you get things that are kind of weird looking or wrinkly, use the smooth tool and it will take care of them. This is your strength slider here underneath your size slider. If you turn that all the way up, it's really going to start affecting it. Like if you turn that all the way up and you're on standard brush, it comes out really fast. And you can end up with some weird looking stuff. Now that could be a good thing, it could also be a bad thing. So I usually don't suggest doing that. I keep my sliders about here, unless I really need to come at this with something like smoothing this out. If I went way too far with the standard brush and I want to really smash it down and smooth it out good, then I might turn my strength way up, but I always turn it back down so I don't forget. Alright, so I'm getting this really bizarre looking thing, and that's fine. So another way to cut into the clay, you could use standard brush and plus minus to do this, to do something like that. I'm going to undo that. You could also use this crease tool, which is going to do exactly what it sounds like it does. It's going to make a crease in the mesh. When I say the word mesh, I'm just talking about this. That's what this is. It's like all those little squares and intersecting lines. It's a mesh. So I'm making this weird creature. I crease there. I could crease here. And what if I wanted to pull a section? So there's a tool here called Pull. And this is where you can really start having some fun. I can size up my brush using that slider and I can pull this thing to go off in a completely new direction. Now you're going to end up with some weird stuff if you're not careful though. A lot of using Forger is just knowing how to manage it so that you don't completely destroy this, because what students do a lot of times is they might do stuff like this where they start twisting it around and they think this looks cool, and maybe it does, but it can't be used for anything. This is not going to work. Let's look at the mesh up close. This is a mess. You have faces that are intersecting with each other. If you put this into a game software or a VR program, or try to 3D print it, it's going to go berserk, because the program won't know what to do with all of these intersecting faces. So you can't do stuff like this. I'm going to undo all of that. So if you end up with something that looks anything like that, please do not submit it. That is not going to work. Just a tip then, how do you not end up with that? Well, if you're using the pull tool, pulling just a little bit at a time. You don't want to pull and then change directions, because that's when you get this really weird wrinkling stuff. If I turn off my wireframe, I'm going to see that's not good, these surfaces here. So in some ways you can just kind of play around with this and come up with cool stuff, but in other ways you do actually have to know a bit about what you're doing and not make just a big 3D mess of the mesh, because ultimately it's really just going to come back on you. You're not going to be able to use it for anything, so it's going to defeat the purpose of making it. But now if you're doing it the right way, you can really make some really cool looking stuff pretty easily. So we're talking about sea creatures, and I'm just thinking in general here. You don't have to come up with your sea creature today. You won't, because you don't know all the features yet. But you might start trying to come up with one, or something that looks like it could be a sea creature. So I'm going to show you a tool here. Now this part, you don't have to do this today. If you are still confused, you're trying to work your way through this, just keep experimenting with it, make something, screenshot it, and submit. But I'm going to show you some features that you may want to use. So let's say you're doing the pull, and you're getting some strange results here. Let me turn off wireframe. See how wrinkly that is on the surface there? I don't want that. That doesn't look good. So I could either smooth it out, which works most of the time, but sometimes you may lose some of your shape. If I turn wireframe back on, I'm still seeing, the reason why that's happening is because there's not enough squares, and I dragged the squares from a sphere and I pulled them way out here, and so it's getting stretched out, and there's only going to be so much I can do because there's not enough squares over here. So if I start pulling out from there, then I get really strange stuff, even if I'm just pulling a little bit and being careful. None of that can be used, so I don't want to do that. Here's how you fix this problem. There's a tool, if you click on this cube up here, called remeshing. So where your resolution is here, if you set it to be something like maybe 80 and hit remesh, look at what it does to all those squares. It takes them and it distributes them evenly over the model. You may lose some of your details in places, and if that happens, it's probably not that big of a deal, because if you lose details by remeshing, they probably shouldn't have been there to begin with. But it makes this thing nice and smooth, and it gives you an even amount of squares everywhere. So now if you go to edit something back here, it doesn't get all strange, because there's enough squares back there to really make this thing good. Now it looks a little bit less like a sea creature and something that lives on land because it has legs. But sooner or later, if you keep using the pull tool, you're going to end up with that weird stuff again. So you can always go back and remesh. If you get something that looks too strange, like that doesn't look good at all, I may want to do a combination of smoothing and remeshing. Keeping wireframe on always helps me see what's going on. Taking wireframe off helps me see what the actual surface is going to look like. So you need to kind of switch back and forth between those as well. So I'm just smoothing things out here. I don't know what this is. It kind of looks like a little warthog or something, but it's my own creation. So it's my own creative idea. When you get something that you think you like, as always, we just submit our work for the day. You're not going to finish anything like that needs to be 3D printed or in VR today, because you just don't know enough about this program yet. We got a few more lessons to go before we really get there. As of now, I still want you just playing and experimenting and having fun sculpting things. Having said that, I don't want you doing anything where you're mangling the mesh, because that's not good practice. It's nothing you can use. I know you may think it looks cool, but I see it all the time. Students end up with that stuff, and I tell them, I'm sorry, I can't use that. So just beware of that and explore some of the other features. When you're done with something that you like, take a picture and submit.